Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming into the show. We got a fantastic week of fantastic guests. So let's kick it off first. I've absolutely loved her content and all of her hard work. She's been covering the Bears from the jump. You can check her out on Chicago Football Weekly with GNTV. Follow them at GNTV on WGN. It is Kaitlin Sharkey. Kaitlin, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm great. I'm in that middle of the season grind, so it's good to be on the show.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because a little bit of what I want to talk about today is that it sort of feels like a switch in the season for the Chicago Bears, right? I mean, they're 3-7 right now. We're not really looking at the playoffs, but when you talk about midseason, it sounds like maybe a second season is about to be birthed, hopefully with the return of Justin Fields. So, Kaitlin, you're there every single day. I don't know if you're able to be at practice the last couple of days. It's early. We're taping this on a Tuesday, but can you provide any update or progress right now on Justin Fields, his thumb injury, and will he be available versus the Lions this week?
My guess and my, kind of gut feeling that he will be available against the Lions. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he did practice last week. He was throwing last week. I thought he looked great in practice, and he continued to practice again on Monday. And as the week progresses, he's been in that limited role. I think they just didn't want to rush him back on a short week last week, and especially with the mini bye to follow. Now, like you mentioned, there's this other half of the season. So, you want him at full strength, you want him healthy, and you want him to be able to be evaluated for his future and for this team and to salvage, whatever's left of this season for this offense. So I think he's going to play against the Lions. Obviously, it's going to be a tough challenge. Going on the road to Ford Field with hopefully his thumb is completely back to full strength. It was basically just grip strength, and he wasn't yet medically cleared. But from what I saw in practice, the ball's zipping out of his hands pretty good. So I think Tyson Bagent's time is now over for the Bears, and we get Justin Fields back.
Well, you're making a great point, too, as well, because I think a lot of the conversation when we have with Justin Fields in general is a lot of people talk about the things that we need to do to build around him. And then the other side of the fence says, well, you're making excuses for him. So I think that maybe is the right move, hopefully by the Chicago Bears staff, to try and get him to 100% as possible. Because is that an issue, too, as well, that if he comes out, if he's rusty next week, we can easily just kind of point to the thumb and say, well, he's not this. When the thumb is 100%, we'll be right where he needs to be.
And I think, Joy, that's the part that's exhausting to me at this point in the season. I understand last year they didn't have weapons. It was, new coaches, new regime, new playbook, all of these things. And so he comes into this season, and then of course he deals with this injury. And he had some great games already this season before he got hurt, especially with DJ Moore, the one playmaker that they brought in to make a difference. And he has made a difference with Justin, not so much, I don't think, with Tyson Bagent. And again, that's a whole nother, can of worms. But I think when you're talking about no more excuses with Justin Fields, if he's healthy and he goes out there in Detroit and this offense is disjointed and the chemistry's off, we can no longer say, well, he was out 4 games. There's not any time for that anymore. And I think he's at a point in his career where if you can't just jump right in after getting the reps now, basically a week and a half of practice, almost 2 full weeks of practice, you don't need those extra reps to kind of have this chemistry with your line and your playmakers. So if they don't come out firing against Detroit, you're just running out of excuses at this point. And I don't think it's fair for him or this offense or this entire team to continue to make those excuses for him.
And Kaitlin, that's why I think I find this part of the season a little exciting. I don't know. Am I a masochist for feeling that way, that there is a certain excitement about Justin Fields, coming back? I'm not necessarily, I still want that high draft pick. So from your seat right now, what does it look like over these last couple of months, over these last 7 games for Justin Fields? Obviously, is it an eye test? Is a combination of statistical? Is it a combination of wins and losses for you that's going to provide enough evidence that can have you or anyone else, a fan, a reporter in the Chicago Bears organization, and say, hey, Justin Fields is our guy. We need to move forward with him. Or, maybe we need to look someplace else because we are going to have that high draft pick. What is that combination? What is that formula for you for success for Justin Fields?
I think the majority of it is an eye test. I think if you talk about, getting a certain number of wins over losses, they have a tough schedule to finish things out. And I think when you talk about going against the Lions and the Vikings now suddenly, and then the Browns, and there's just certain situations where you're like, okay, well, maybe if it doesn't come down to wins and losses, it has to be an eye test. And if he can manage the game, if he's making the throws he needs to make, if he's showing that athleticism is the main reason that they brought him into Chicago in the first place, if we're seeing that Justin Fields, the offense isn't disjointed, he's not making mistakes, then I think they're like deciding, okay, Justin is our guy. We have this belief and faith in Justin. But if there's none of that there, and we continue to see the same issues with him, or if it, through his progressions and his reads and his accuracy, if that's not there, I think you have to really take a solid look at like, okay, we've done what we've needed to do. The offensive line, they don't play perfectly, but they've played better than they have in Justin's career and earlier in Justin's career in Chicago. So it's kind of on him. And I think a lot of it is an eye test, situationally learning how to win, being in those situations. And I mean, I got to give it to Tyson Bagent, and 2 for 2 as a rookie in 4 games is not bad, because situationally he handled the game and he has command and he has poise. If you could mold Justin and Tyson Bagent together, I think you'd have a great quarterback in Chicago. You can't unfortunately do that. So I think for Justin, it's a lot of, we know he's athletic. We know he has the skill set. How does he put it into action? And how does he lead his team to wins? And I think that's something we just haven't seen from him.
Yeah, there's an optic to it. There's a feeling, and I think you're using a great phrase, situationally. There's moments when you really kind of want to see it from Justin Fields. Like in that Washington game, I felt like he was possessed at times. Just the way that he was kind of getting in and out of the huddle, the way that he shredded that opposing defense, you're like, okay, I can live with that. I can build off of that. I can build my franchise around that. But it's this few and far in between that I think has the skeptics continue to grow daily. But he has that opportunity now moving forward the next 2 months to be quiet. And real quick, if they put Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields together, would their father be an arm wrestling champion cop? That would be like the most ultimate.
It would be amazing. I mean, if you could just blend their skill sets and I know there's a lot of conversations. Tyson comes out and has this good game as this rookie. We love the storyline. And then it's like he came crashing down to earth and it was more humbled, like, welcome to the NFL, kid. And Justin's had those moments too, but it's just funny when you think about, when I've watched the games now, I'm like, man, if that was Justin, he would, spin out and rush for 50 yards and break free and they'd have a big explosive play. But then there's also situations where, I've watched Justin where I'm like, I don't know. I think Tyson makes that throw, makes that tight window, check down on whatever they need him to pick up the first down more easy. So it's funny that, watching now the body of work of both of them, you're like, man, if you could just put them together, they'd really be onto something here.
Yeah, the release time on the bubble screen, right? Tyson Bagent, you're like, yeah, can we just bring that right over? I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about the fathers combining. I'll let you out of a speeding ticket if we arm wrestle or something like that. I'm just trying to
be amazing.
So I've been tracking this around town a little bit, Kaitlin, and I want to get your perspective on it. Because when you're trying to make a decision on Justin Fields, I think Chicago Bears fans, I mean, honestly, you've got a chance to really kind of absorb the Chicago Bears culture, maybe the Twitter, the not so great part of it over the last couple of years. And I just kind of feel like that we don't really exactly know or see what elite quarterback play looks like. I know that we desperately want it, but I'm not sure we exactly know what it is when it's right in front of our face. And I just want to get your take generally on how you feel the quarterback position has been across the NFL this year. Because from my seat, I'm just kind of looking around and I'm saying, gosh, if you roll the clocks back to 2019, there's perhaps a dozen quarterbacks that were either elite, Pro Bowlers, MVPs, guys that went to Super Bowls, everywhere from a Tom Brady down to a Cam Newton, that have left the game. And now there's a transition going on right now in the NFL at the quarterback position. And I'm kind of sitting there and asking myself, gosh, even with all of his flaws, is Justin Fields still maybe a top 12 quarterback? So how do you view the quarterback position this year in the NFL, and maybe where it's heading in the next couple of years?
Yeah, it is interesting to think about, Joey, because you feel like, especially when Aaron Rodgers got hurt in game 1, you're like, okay, well, that was the last of like that generation of quarterbacks. So now, these young guys have taken over now for a while. So I'm not saying that, this is something new, but when you look at just the quarterback play this season, Patrick Mahomes is going to continue to be Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. Those are the guys that you're, at the top of your list. But you look at, Josh Allen on Monday night and how the Bills have struggled, and how much of that is Allen and his interceptions, or the lack of, whatever they're trying to figure out in Buffalo. And then I don't know. I just feel like it's not as strong this year. And even with Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, it's just a combination of things. And it's curious to me because, when you start ranking them, you're like, well, Justin, if he strings together a few good games, especially to end this season, you could put him right up there, especially with his unique skill set. So I think, he's definitely not toward the top of that top 12, but I think he sits in a pretty good place. And I don't know, maybe, and I don't want to say like quarterback play is down this season, but it's different. Like you said, if you roll the clock back just 2 years, things looked very different for a lot of these quarterbacks, except Patrick Mahomes, who continues just to do, his superhero thing. So other than that, it's the elite days. It's kind of like you don't know what you're going to get each week. And then you got guys like Josh Dobbs coming out and throwing 5 touchdowns in 2 games. So it's exciting to see those kind of storylines and those quarterbacks kind of make a name for themselves. But yeah, the elite, I feel like those numbers are dwindling.
There's an awkward transition going on just a little bit, right? I mean, if you roll it back, there'd be a week when it'd be Phillip Rivers versus Matt Ryan. Now, neither of those guys, honestly, you know what I mean? Like, but there was a time when those guys were both incredibly above average, capable quarterbacks. And yeah, when you see a guy like Kirk Cousins go down, Aaron Rodgers go down, I mean, the Rams are just kind of begging Matt Stafford to just kindly go off into the sunset a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of a transition and you're making the list and you're like, oh man, like is Baker Mayfield the 11th best quarterback in the NFL this year? And that can make an interesting case for Justin about possibly being in that group. And you made a great distinction. I think there's a top 5 that Justin is definitely not in that category and no one else is. I mean, the Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes, Hurts,
CJ Stroud. Yeah, I forgot about CJ. How did I forget about CJ? I feel bad.
and just in general, I don't mean to put you on the spot because you cover NFL, you're absorbing it on the daily. I mean, do you get a chance to watch any college? Is there a quarterback right now among the Drake May, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix class that has you as standing out above anybody else? Because I'm not really. I mean, they look like
I'm not sold on any of them.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I can make a fair, assessment just purely because I haven't watched enough of them and their quarterbacking. But I think it's always interesting too, because these guys, they go through college and they're, this is the guy that's going to be taken at 1. I think about last year's draft and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and look where they are now in their respective seasons. So I think it's always so fun to watch and listen to the hype of like Caleb Williams or Drake May and all of these things. And you're like, I always think, what's this going to look like in the NFL? What kind of NFL quarterback are they going to be? So I always hold off on my assessments because, just to be honest, I'm like, I don't know. And it could go a number of different ways. So I leave that to the college, the draft, the mock drafts, and the analysts to do that.
Yeah, I call it when I start doing my YouTube research is when I really start drilling in and figuring it out. As it stands right now, just a couple more on the Bears really quick. As it stands right now, I'm sure you get a lot of fan interaction, not just through your show, Chicago Football Weekly with Jared Payton, but also on Twitter. Do you feel like it's leaning more towards Chicago Bears fans who prefer that they move on from Justin Fields? Or if they kept, I'm just kind of living in the world that I think there is a world where you can keep Justin Fields, use those 2 top 5 picks, and actually still be in a pretty decent spot. I mean, do you think Bears fans are starting to loosen the grip on their love of Justin Fields, or where does that stand right now?
I think a little bit. And I think, when you start seeing everybody kind of, they were clamoring at Tyson Bagent, and then all of a sudden, the last couple of games, they're like, well, maybe now we don't want Tyson Bagent. I think that's more of a sign that they're not sold on Justin Fields. Because if you start talking about, well, maybe we can run with this rookie. Okay, like let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I think that's the indication that we're not sold on Justin Fields. And I think it's a lot of things, but ultimately it's just the being tired of losing. And I think it's no matter what they do to fix things, that has been the biggest issue to me with the 2023 Chicago Bears. It's not necessarily, obviously a quarterback is a big part of it, but not everything is fallen on Justin. The defense up until 2 weeks ago, I didn't think looked good at all. So there's so many issues with that team that it's like, I feel like Bears fans are just like, what is it going to be this week? And they're not so... But I don't think we're seeing the Justin Fields, like, that's our guy, let's keep him forever mentality anymore. It's more of like, all right, well, how's this going to go down this week?
Yeah, I'm probably on the fan side of things. I think we're getting a little desperate, and when you get desperate, you get a little confused, and it's not necessarily the clearest. Don't have the quite clarity of the tunnel vision that you need from a perspective. You led me right into my next topic. I think there's been a lot of talk about the Chicago Bears defense over the last couple weeks. They've gotten a little bit healthier. Obviously, you add a Montez Sweat. Are you buying or selling this defense as an ascending unit right now, moving forward into the next month, which hopefully can lead to more competitive football, which again gives us a more opportunity to see Justin Fields in an easier to digest scenario of whether he's going to stick around or not.
And I don't want to sound like Matt Eberflus here, because I really honestly never want to sound like Matt Eberflus when I'm talking about like
do the impression, please.
sound. Yeah, no, I can't. But fundamentally sound, if this defense comes out each week and plays fundamentally sound, and I will give it to Matt Eberflus, because him acting as defensive coordinator since the departure of Alan Williams has changed the defense a little bit. You can see them be more aggressive. And then obviously they get their secondary healthy back with Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson, and then Jalen Johnson's on the field. That always makes a huge difference. Kyler Gordon has had a phenomenal game last week. So when the secondary is good, and then you add Montez Sweat, and yes, it's only been, 2 games, but he makes an impact. He was making Bryce Young so uncomfortable, and I think his presence alone was needed for that pass rush. They didn't just have that like guy that someone has to be aware of all the time. That, let's just face it, that Bears pass rush was abysmal. They weren't there. So I think Montez already has made an impact in such a short amount of time. So if they play well, if they tackle well, I think this defense is kind of getting their swag and aggressiveness that we saw in training camp, because every single day in training camp, this defense would be flying all over the place, and they had this energy about them and this swag, and the offense was kind of like annoyed by it. Well, that disappeared for a big chunk of the season. Now I feel like they're trying to get it back. We'll see how they handle like this second half of the season. But Montez Sweat already, I feel like, has made a difference, and I'm excited to see where he can take this pass rush that, struggled to get any kind of pressure on the quarterback.
I think we're still sitting at 11 sacks. Is that right?
Yeah. Am
I there?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not great.
No.
Real quick. So we're just going to roll it forward to the Lions really quick. I believe the spread right now is 9.5. I don't know if that's going to go up. I don't know if that's going to go down. I'm not going to ask you whether the Chicago Bears are going to beat the Lions this weekend, but do you feel like that this is trending towards a competitive effort from the Chicago Bears, or do you still feel like that Detroit? Do you buy in Detroit's talent so much that it's just going to be tough for Chicago this weekend?
I just feel like it's going to be tough for the Bears. And I look at what the Lions got themselves in a shootout with the Chargers, and that's not a recipe for success for the Chicago Bears, especially in a first game back for Justin Fields. They do not want to be in any kind of situation where they have to score 38, 41 points. I mean, we know that they can't even come close to that. So I think it's just going to be a really tough test. I think Detroit is the real deal. Yes, they've had some bumps along the road, but barely. So I think they have the advantage. They're at home. Dan Campbell has this team fired up. They're super talented. And now Justin coming off the injury, first game back. If there's any kind of rust, it's going to be a long day at Ford Field.
Final one for you here. Thank you so much for joining us here on Believe in Bears. You can follow all Kaitlin Sharkey's work here at WGN at GNTV, Chicago Football Weekly, with Jared Payton, who's fantastic as well. You guys do such a great job. Forgive me a minute. I want to ask you, this is going to be a Wisconsin question right here. I want you to kind of walk into the Wisconsin bummerverse, if you will. And I just want to ask you, from your perspective, what are you hearing from back home, from friends and family? What is bumming them out more right now? And I'm going to give you some options. Option number 1 is the Bucs defense. Option number 2, Craig Counsell. Option number 3, Badgers football. Or option number 4, just the reality of Jordan Love and the step back that the Packers have taken this season. What is bumming our friends up north the most right now?
I would say in this moment, it's Craig Counsell by far. I mean, I attended his press conference as the new Cubs manager.
Is that weird?
Oh, as a Wisconsin girl, it's wild. And part of my was like, oh, I don't like this. And then the other half of me was like, I'm a Chicago Cubs reporter now, so this is fantastic. I covered Craig for 6 seasons. Like, this is awesome. I'm excited to see him. But like my friends and family and everyone in Wisconsin, I posted like a clip of him walking in and putting on his Cubs shirt. And the reaction I got, they're like, this is Favre to the Vikings. This is worse than Favre to the Vikings. Like, I can't believe this. I'm disgusted. Wow. Like, it's really, really upsetting Brewers fans. And I think the Bucs will be fine. It's the beginning of the season. The Badgers are the Badgers. And I think Packer fans know deep down in their heart they had to ride this wave of like Jordan Love. This is his first year. Let him, and they showed some signs of progress that they're at least heading in the right direction. They have a young team. They'll get it figured out. I think it's the Craig Counsell. Just leaving. I mean, he is Mr. Wisconsin. He has been for a long time. There's a lot of emotions there after 17 seasons as a player and manager. So that is the main bummer right now. And I'm excited to have him here in Chicago, but my Brewers heart is like, oh man.
It was shocking. I mean, to say that anyone saw that coming, God would be lying. It was just so incredible. This isn't like Jose Valentin, like going from the Brewers to the White Sox or something like that some years ago. I do find that to be really interesting, though. Do you feel like, just really quick, is it have more to do with what Craig Counsell, the born and raised son of Wisconsin, is it have a little bit more to do with that, what's going on with the fan base? Because when you mentioned Favre and the Vikings, Favre is perhaps, him and Reggie White, and I don't know, Giannis are one of the greatest. If you make a Mount Rushmore of Wisconsin athletes, they're definitely in consideration there. Did that have more to do with him retiring each year? Had people kind of grown a little weary of Favre at that time? And is that why Craig Counsell hurts a little bit more? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And it took a long time for fans to get over Favre, but then they welcomed him back and, everything was fine. It was water under the bridge. Time, I think, will do this with Craig Counsell as well, because there's a large portion of Wisconsin sports fans that are happy for Craig, that are like, you know what? He gave us 8 incredible seasons, 5 postseason appearances, 3 NL Central titles. Like, we still love him. He's still going to have a home in Whitefish Bay. His family's still going to live there. So it's very much like, oh, it just stings. So I think his first time maybe back to Milwaukee may not be a pleasant one. I expect to hear some boos in the crowd, but time heals all. And I think more and more people will respect Craig for what he brought to the organization, because I don't really like the way, Mark Adonasio, the owner, kind of made the comments that he did about, well, Craig lost his community. I don't know if it's really fair to say. Craig wanted growth. He can go to a storied franchise 90 minutes from where his house is, and make, $40 million over 5 years. So no one's going to say no to that. So he looked very happy and excited. So time will make things better, I hope, in the eyes of Brewers fans.
The first one is, it's why I love being from the Midwest. The fact that you said that they're like, you know what, we still just good luck, Craig. You know what I mean? Like, they still wish Tim luck is a super Midwest thing to do. And for the Brewers owner, I'm sure Craig can finally probably get a great restaurant reservation in Milwaukee still for years to come. So I don't know if he's necessarily losing his community there on that one. A little bit of a broken heart. But yeah, it just honestly just makes the NL Central a lot more exciting all of a sudden. And are you on board with that? It does really, it's a signal, right? It's a very clear signal that the Chicago Cubs are going to have an incredibly active, interesting, perhaps exciting, explosive offseason.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part. Greg said it in his press conference. The time now is to be a Cub, and there's a lot of momentum, and I want to be part of that, and I can feel that. I think they were even on the cusp of it last season with David Ross, and they kind of lost it at the end, unfortunately, but they were really building some great things right there. So if they can do that, spend some more money, hey, maybe Shohei Ohtani decides he doesn't want to stay in a warm weather climate and he wants to come to Chicago, that would be even better. That would blow my mind. But yeah, I think the Cubs are going to be serious players this season.
I just want to keep having you going into press rooms and being like, I can't wait to see who walks through that door. And it's Craig Counsell, Shohei, Pete Alonso, whatever it is.
I would die.
Let's just keep that rolling. Keep that rolling. Kaitlin, thank you so much for joining Believe in Bears. Really appreciate it. You've been a great guest in the past. Thank you so much for always taking time. Your star continues to rise on WGN TV. You're doing great work with the Chicago Bears. Chicago is very lucky to have you. Thank you so much for joining the show, and hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much, Joey. I always love coming on the show.